Part 17. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 169. This type of person is the real danger, full of bad intentions and working hard to harm others. If one's good friend Chang is free and just a bloodthirsty murderous lunatic, everyone can at least be on guard against him. This kind of person is hard to guard against. Every look in his eyes, every movement, and every word he says to you is carefully packaged. I never said a word to him, but I learned many lying skills from him. Thus, a set of basic theories for deceiving people was summed up, which are nothing more than 3 routines: exposing oneself to shame to gain sympathy, talking about the past to build relationships, and bluffing to intimidate people. I learned all of this from this guy. He can be said to be his mentor. As his good teacher, the only thing I can give him is one sentence: may the disease defeat you soon. Taking 2 steps back, Su Tong strode straight to the last room. With a push, the door to the room was opened. The door was not locked at all. The room is not big, but it is different from other rooms. This place doesn't feel like a ward, but more like a home. The furnishings here are very simple, with a bed, a square table, a portrait of the great leader hanging on the wall, and a radio and thermos bottle on the table. A rocking chair, next to it is a huge bookshelf filled with all kinds of weird novels. Su Tong quickly took off his shoes, strode into the room, and picked up the tea brewed in the cup on the table. After drinking the water, he complained, "What happened? I was only out for such a short time, and the hospital actually let Wuju escape? It's fine now. This guy ran away to somewhere, hey. His head is so big, I originally wanted to take him away when I came back this time. Did you eat tiger gall outside, or dig out a golden pimple? Why haven't we seen each other for a long time? You are very strong. You caused Chang Wuzi so badly at first, but now you dare to say that you have the ability to subdue him, then you might as well show mercy and take away the guy outside the door. He's annoying me to death every day." The speaker was an old man, holding a fan in his hand, lying on a rocking chair, holding the fan in front of his chest and shaking it gently. The old man looks to be about the same age as Mr. Song, or even a little older than Mr. Song. He has a smooth head and a pair of snow-white long-lasting eyebrows hanging on his eyebrows, but he is very energetic. This is the old baby in their hospital, so he is highly respected. Even the old director of the hospital would call him old brother when he sees him. The origin of the old man is a mystery. I once tried to find the old man's information, but couldn't find it at all. Even the old man has no name. The old people in the hospital call him Olda. Some newly appointed directors, and even the deputy deans who just took office a few years ago, were sternly warned by the old dean not to disturb the old man unless he had nothing to do. Su Tong has been playing here since he was a child, and runs here whenever he has something to do. When he was young, Olda often gave him a lot of candies and even gave him toys from outside. I don't know how he did this. As time passed, Su Tong felt in his heart that this was his grandfather. He didn't have so many etiquettes on weekdays. He looked the same when entering his home. As if he sensed that the old man was unhappy, Su Tong immediately came over obediently, tapped the old man's leg, brought the tea on the side, and started to explain. "Hey, old man, I treat you like a brother. There is no grudge that cannot be resolved. As for the great God outside, forget it. If I really let him out, he might stab me in the back a few times." After saying that, his eyes rolled around and he said flatteringly, "Old man, I have found a place to stay outside. Don't worry about me. I will visit you often in the future." As he spoke, he did not forget to take out 2 cigarettes, 2 bottles of wine, and some peanuts from his arms and put them on the table. Olda glanced at the things on the table and shook his head calmly. Let's go, don't come back after you leave. It's good to have a place to stay, but there's one thing. Don't do anything illegal. You are different from that child without restraint. The outside world was once ours, then it was theirs, and finally it is yours. Remember, be a human being and keep a thin line. Don't drive people to death. After Olda spoke earnestly, he waved his hand to signal Sutong to leave early, and don't wait any longer and be unable to leave even if he wants to. Okay, old man, I will remember your words. Sutong suppressed the smile on his face, nodded heavily, turned around and walked out. As soon as he went out, he touched his pocket, and sure enough he found an extra small envelope in his pocket. When he opened it, he found a check for 100,000 yuan inside. Looking at the check, Sutong's expression darkened, and he turned back to look at Olda, who was sitting in the rocking chair. He saw the old man waving the fan in his hand at him a few times to signal farewell. Where did Olda come from with this check of 100,000 yuan? Sutong didn't think it was any surprise at all. Olda is like this, mysterious, talkative, and doesn't like to be polite to others. Although he is locked up here, he has had an intuition since he was a child. It seems that Olda is a big bird lying on the treetop. If he wants to leave, he can leave at any time. I once asked him, why don't you leave? The outside world is so wonderful, what are you doing here? But Lao said that the outside was just a bigger cage for him, and he would never be free unless he unlocked the cage in his heart. Sutong didn't know what the cage in Olda's heart was, but what was certain was that this was definitely not his cage. He was not short of money, and there were even a few gold bars in the prop book, but he accepted the 100,000 yuan without hesitation. Olda will feel at ease only if he accepts the money. He is worried that like this kid Chang Wugu, he will cause a storm outside as soon as he goes out, and it will be difficult to gain a foothold in the end. Therefore, accepting this money is an attitude that reassures Olda. After saying goodbye to Olda, Sutong returned the same way, easily carried Sun Lianshen, who was still unconscious, on his shoulders and brought him to Ronaldinho on the first floor. Ronaldinho was also surprised by Sutong's appearance, but he had been stimulated too much today. When Sutong threw Sun Lianshen into his arms, Ronaldinho's mind hadn't even turned around yet. Only when he came back to his senses did he realize that Sutong people have left. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. There are still many patrolling police cars on the road. But the matter has been almost suppressed, and there is no follow-up news report at all. This also confirmed his worries from the side. Worried that this bastard Chang Wuju would really become a player? He felt very unhappy when he thought that the pawns, MTS, and good brothers he had appointed were poached by the Script Experience Center. But he was unhappy, and there was nothing he could do about it. What are you thinking about? Hurry up and follow me. At this time, Mr. Song walked out of the house carrying a small satchel and shouted to Sutong. Master, whose family is hosting a banquet. Hearing this, Mr. Song was so surprised that he didn't pick up the stool and slap him. He said angrily, you just know how to eat. You don't work much all day long, but you eat a lot. As he said that, he threw the satchel around his waist to Sutong and pointed to the north. Go, call a car, let's go eat, bot, go to Bamang Mountain. Bamang Mountain? So late. Stop talking nonsense and hurry up. Under Song Lao's urging, Sutong could only carry his backpack, hail a taxi, and go straight to Bamang Mountain. The driver in the car heard that he was going to Bamang Mountain and didn't think it was strange. Although there have been countless barren hills in Bamang since ancient times, they are now no longer allowed to be buried, and a jungle park has been built on them. Even if it is the tomb sweeping day to visit the ancestors' graves, they cannot burn incense and light fires. Now it's lively up there, and there's a barbecue restaurant. There are not a few people who go there to have barbecue in the evening. The driver was also talkative along the way, talking nonsense. As he talked, the driver glared, stepped on the accelerator and stopped the car. He turned around and said with a smile, "You two, go ahead on the path ahead. It's just a few steps away, it's not easy to drive there, so you can get off here." Su Tong's brows tightened, and his expression immediately turned ugly. Wasn't this a clear sign of a rush? This place was still 3 kilometers away from Mangshan. Just when he was about to get angry, he was stopped by Mr. Song. "Okay, let's get out of the car and leave. You don't have to change the money." As Mr. Song said that, he pulled Su Tong out of the car. The driver curled his lips and stuffed the money into his pocket. He turned his eyes and looked at the girl standing on the roadside not far away. He stepped on the accelerator and drove the car. "Go over." Watching the car drive away, Su Tong snorted and remembered the car's license plate number. Mr. Song looked disapproving of this, and said with a smile, "Actually, it's just right to stop here. Let's blow in the wind, take a walk, and walk slowly over to digest food. By the way, the book I gave you last time, you saw where it came from." It was a good thing that Mr. Song didn't mention it, but when he mentioned it, Su Tong became confused. He threw the last book on the bedside and didn't even read a page. Looking at his face, Mr. Song immediately understood and immediately scolded him. Seeing that the road ahead was getting darker and darker, Su Tong quickly found something to say to divert the conversation. "Master, why are we coming to Buman Mountain so late? It's not to have barbecue, right?" As Su Tong said, he couldn't help but look at the barbecue restaurants in the distance, not to mention that they tasted pretty good. Rotten wood cannot be carved. Today is the death anniversary of your master. Let's go up and kowtow to your master. By the way, your master can teach you his unique skills, and also give you the ability to protect yourself." "A unique skill?" Su Tong's eyes suddenly lit up and he quickly asked, "What's the secret skill?" When Mr. Song saw his appearance, a look of pride suddenly appeared on his face. He touched his beard and whispered, "Bless Shankao." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 170. As the saying goes, seeking immortals and worshipping mountains has no incantations. 1 button hurts people, 2 buttons invite gods, and 3 buttons knock on the door of the king of hell. In our family, you must first learn to worship mountain buttons. This is the basic skill. Su Tong had already entered the door, and Mr. Song didn't hide anything from him. He took the opportunity of the two of them walking on the mountain to talk to him slowly. "I saw the gentle mountain breeze, which felt particularly cool on people. The origami craftsmanship has been inherited by 4 families, and each family is different. No one can explain the origin. I can only say that it was passed down from the sect founded by Taoist Mai Hua. Every family has its own style. Our lineage is passed down from within to outside. There are not so many rules, but few people have died well. By the time of your master's generation, the talent has withered away, and there is no connection between the past and the present." Reached the point. Speaking of the master, Su Tong couldn't help but think of the master in a long gown, with red lipstick and white teeth, and a bookish look. "Your master is very knowledgeable," Mr. Song said with admiration for his master. "In their lineage, they have the ability to collect grievances, bring good luck to the deceased, and guide the wandering souls. Although they have money molds with ghost tools, they can only make so much money to guide the way. In contrast, it is said that the other 3 families have the ability to travel with ghosts, the ability to fold paper into treasures to bribe ghosts, and the ability to drive ghosts. It can be said that among the 4 inheritances, their lineage has the worst abilities and is at the bottom. But they don't know what kind of luck they have, and a genius can pop up every few generations. I won't talk about the previous ones, but just talk about Su Tongxi, the master Shuigui. Erudite and talented, with advanced thinking, he even learned Chinese and Western knowledge. Many people said that he was a teacher. But Shuigui didn't care about this. Instead, he reorganized and completed the few things from his own lineage. In the end, he not only became famous, but also created the unique skill of Bashan Kao. In the battle at Buman Mountain, your master Shuigui became famous in one battle. When Mr. Song said this, his eyes were flashing with dancing fire, and he was full of energy. He didn't see that battle in person, but he could learn a thing or two from the seniors who had visited him. His master used a single move to kill the mission traitor instantly. From then on, Bashan Ko became famous in the world. Hearing what Mr. Song said so passionately, Su Tong couldn't help but wonder, "Master, why don't you teach me directly? Why bother the master? You're the only one who talks a lot of bullshit." Mr. Song glared at him fiercely, and then whispered, "Because I didn't learn." Ah! Su Tong was shocked. Mr. Song, as the only descendant of Master Shuigui, didn't learn such an awesome trick? When mentioning this matter, Mr. Song just smiled and answered the question, "Sometimes if you don't learn the tricks to save your life, you can save your life." Su Tong was startled, and then he remembered that when he met his master, the master was hiding in Tibet, and he immediately felt relieved. Judging from the situation at that time, Master Song's refusal to teach Mr. Song might also be a form of protection. While the two were talking, they had already walked into Mang Mountain from the path. Mang Mountain is actually very big, but in the real sense, Bay Mang Mountain is only the area north of Luoyang. Looking far away, you can still see some scattered buildings of Shangqing Palace. Mr. Song pointed at the Shangqing Palace, which is now a key protection unit, and chatted with him casually. He said that there was a Taoist living here back then, named Zhenjun Beidong, who was also very popular. It was recognized that everyone in Shijulia created his own dirty path. The law is very powerful. When Su Tong heard this, he asked what kind of powerful method it was, but Song Lao laughed loudly, "Hey, a broom with shit on it is just like Lu Buletin was alive." In fact, this was a joke back then. But it's not completely fabricated, it's true. It is said that this Beidong Zhenjun was a dung worker. He usually stayed in the Shangqing Palace and dressed like a Taoist priest. But at that time, the Shangqing Palace was already deserted. He just wanted a legitimate reason to occupy this place, so to the outside world claims to be a Taoist priest. Later, people with lofty ideals from all over the world gathered in Buman Mountain, braving the big consequences, and disturbed this guy's peaceful dream. He didn't know what happened, so he ran out cursing. As a result, he was beaten on the spot by a Taoist priest from the Quanzhen sect because he was not strong enough. After he went back, he became more and more angry, so he simply rushed out again with a broom. This time it was different. When the Quanzhen Taoist priest saw him coming out, he wanted to beat him up, but he hit him with a broom and splashed hundreds of excrement on the Quanzhen Taoist priest. It turned out that he knew he couldn't defeat the Quanzhen Taoist priest, so he simply dipped the broom in the excrement bucket and brushed it back and forth several times. Think about it, if you swing that broom, all the gods and Buddhas in the sky will run away, just like Lu Buletin in this world. This Quanzhen Taoist broke through the defense on the spot. You must know that the most taboo thing for practitioners is to be contaminated with filthy things. The feces from hundreds of families gather together and turn into fecal poison, which is simply the nemesis of this Quanzhen Taoist. After a few hits, he ran all over the mountain. Later, it seemed that an expert enlightened this guy. From then on, he quietly practiced in Taoist temples with peace of mind, and understood the poison of grains and the way of purification. He became one of the most powerful celebrities in the lower circles at that time. Even the senior masters from well-known orthodox families were afraid of his grain poison. A slight contamination could damage your Taoism for several years, and if it is serious, you will be riddled with filth. Even if it is destroyed here. However, the true Lord of Hundred Dung did not live for a few more years. After all, The poison of dung hurts others first, and it took a long time for people to know that he had passed away. It is said that the experts from the Quanzhen sect who had enmity with him all breathed a sigh of relief when they heard the news, and even wanted to shout to the sky and hold a grand banquet. It is conceivable how much psychological shadow this low-level leader has brought to these Taoist masters. Su Tong's eyes lit up after hearing Mr. Song's little story, and he asked curiously, "Master, why don't you tell me more about Baman Mountain? It's all old news. Why are you worrying so much? Hurry up, your master's grave is right in front of you." Mr. Song pointed at the mound in front of him, took out a folding shovel from the bag on Su Tong's waist, threw it to him, and asked him to clean up the soil and weeds around the mound. "No wonder you came late at night. If it were during the day, ranger patrol cars would pass by from time to time. If they saw you digging, something would inevitably happen." After Su Tong carefully cleaned it up, he dug down along the mound under the guidance of Mr. Song. After digging for a long time, a tombstone buried in the soil appeared. I saw the words "Tomb of Papermaker Shuigui" written on the tombstone. "Oh, so my master is buried here." After he finished speaking, Mr. Song, who was standing behind him, shook his head and said, "No, this is just an empty grave. Buried inside is a paper man, which contains the 3-inch spiritual light that your master discovered when he was dying. The so-called 3-inch aura is a bit of spiritual energy. There will be a memory hidden in it, which is sealed in the paper man. It can be regarded as a treasure left by their lineage. The reason for doing this was helpless. At that time, many people in their family were watching. It was not until Shuigui died and he was sent directly to the crematorium that everyone felt at ease. If the matter of these 3 inches of aura had been known to others at that time, I am afraid that Mr. Song would not be alive today." 3 sticks of yellow incense were inserted in front of the grave, and a handful of paper money was scattered around. After reciting a few words in his mouth, Mr. Song pinched his fingers, and a cinnabar red thread was drawn out of a flower on his fingertips. He twisted the tips of Su Tong's fingers, kneeled down. As he spoke, he held the other end of the cinnabar thread with his fingers, made a seal with his left hand, and formed a seal with his right hand. With a flick of his fingers, he saw the red thread making a circle in mid-air and being put on the paper man's head. "Bye." Su Tong followed the command and bowed towards his master's grave. The strange thing is that when he kowtowed, the paper figures in front of the tomb also followed suit. "Goodbye." The paper man trembled slightly, and actually began to fluoresce. "Goodbye." After Su Tong bowed down for the last time, his mind suddenly buzzed, and he vaguely saw the figure of his master. It's just that the master in front of me no longer has the high-spirited and heroic spirit of the past. He is just an old man. He walked up to him with a kind face and said nothing. He took his arm hand in hand and made a strange gesture towards the front. Gesture. At the same time, a mysterious understanding came to my heart, as if I had caught something in my mind. It was buzzing and I had already memorized all the set of actions in my heart. He didn't know if it was an hour or 2 hours. When he opened his eyelids, a look of exhaustion suddenly appeared on his face. Cold sweat broke out all over his body, which was due to waves of fear. Emotions. When we were on the train, Master changed his gestures and was planning to kill me. He had fully understood the whole set of actions of Bashenko, but only then did he realize that the master on the train had calmly raised his hand in front of him, and he had already closed the door to hell. If he hadn't taken out the demon bell in time, he would probably have become the dead soul of one of the master's men. 1 button will hurt people's lives, 2 buttons will invite ghosts and gods, and 3 buttons will knock on the door of the king of hell. This sentence is indeed no joke. When he came to his senses, he turned around and saw Mr. Song standing on the roadside above, spreading smoke to several forest rangers patrolling the mountain. Obviously, the ranger had already discovered them in this effort, but Mr. Song stepped forward and chatted, and the few people had no intention of disturbing them, and instead stood there waiting for him. "Okay, okay, hurry up, kowtow to your grandpa and let's go back early." Mr. Song noticed that Su Tong had woken up and hurriedly urged him. After speaking, he did not forget to say to several forest rangers, I'm sorry for causing trouble to you. As long as you don't light the fire, you can talk about anything." When the ranger saw that Su Tong had climbed up and the incense below had been completely extinguished, he felt relieved and said to Mr. Song, "How about I take you out? Rather than giving it away, it is more like worrying that the two of them will sneak back and light a fire to burn paper, so it is better to send the person out in person to save worry." Of course, Su Tong and Mr. Song would not refuse this kind offer, so they got in the car and drove all the way out of Mangshan Park. As soon as they left the gate, they suddenly heard a harsh brake sound in the distance, followed by a bang sound. "I saw a faint fire coming out in the distance." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 171. No, there was a car accident. Several forest rangers were also enthusiastic. When they saw this, they stepped on the accelerator. They hurried over regardless of whether Su Tong and Song Lao got off the car. Not far away, I saw a taxi crashing into a pillar. Black smoke was emitting from the engine in front of the car, and the light of fire could still be seen vaguely. The driver was already badly injured. Several people rushed over and rescued the driver. As soon as they took the driver out, the fire in the car got bigger and bigger. Even the fire extinguisher was useless. The fire burned so fiercely that after a while, in no time, the entire car was completely burned. The driver sat aside, with a frightened look on his face, and kept mumbling strangely, "There are ghosts, there are ghosts. That woman is a ghost, and the person who asked me for money and directions is also a ghost." Everyone looked at each other after hearing this. Su Tong glanced at Mr. Song beside him, but the old man smiled and said nothing. It turned out that the driver was none other than the driver who had left them 2-3 miles away. As soon as he turned around, he went to pull the woman. The woman was fair, with a pair of big black and white eyes, which seemed to be seductive. He said he was going home to visit his parents in a village in the north, but he lost his wallet and asked the driver if he could take him all the way. Although he didn't have any money, As she spoke, the woman gave the driver a knowing look. Just that charming smile almost made the driver laugh out loud, so how could he say no? He grabbed the woman and left, but the road became more and more deviated. In the past, he remembered that he could walk on this road in 2 minutes, but today he walked along this road for half an hour without leaving. He could vaguely see some strange shadows on both sides of the road, like many old men and women standing on the roadside looking at him. At that time, the driver felt that half of his head was numb. It was so late at night on this rural road, and there were so many old men and women there. Only then did he realize that the woman behind him had become abnormal, her entire face had turned pale, and she had a strange odor coming from her body. He said that he would be there if he kept going, but the driver dared to continue walking. Seeing the road in front of him getting darker and darker, he suddenly saw an old woman on crutches on the side of the road. He stopped the car and asked the old woman for directions. As a result, the old woman opened her hand and asked him for money. She said that she would show him a way to live for just one piece of money. At this time, not to mention asking for a piece of money, even if all the money he had was taken away, as long as he could leave this hellish place, he didn't care. But after he took out all the money he had, the old woman's face turned ugly. She waved her hand and said she didn't want the money, and asked him to come up with some useful money. At that time, the driver's head was blown. What is useful money? When the old lady took out 2 pieces of money for him, The driver almost fainted. What kind of money were they? They were clearly ghost coins. Where did he get the ghost coins from? A taxi? Just when he was extremely anxious, the old lady suddenly pointed with her hand and saw a round white paper money sandwiched between the money slots. The old lady pinched it gently with her slender fingers, and then a look of satisfaction appeared on her face. Then she sprinkled the money on her head, and the path in front of her was filled with paper money like snowflakes. The old lady asked him to follow the direction in which the paper money was floating. After about 2 minutes, he rushed out and hit a telephone pole. Until this moment, I was still in shock. Everyone looked at each other for a while after hearing this, especially the faces of the forest rangers. Since Bamang was changed into a park, there have been many problems during this period. A few days ago, a large truck on the national highway suddenly rolled over. The next day, someone found a sports car that had fallen into a ditch in the bushes outside the driveway. The young man and woman in the car were already dead. Now that something like this has happened again, it is inevitable that the rangers like them are starting to feel frightened. Let's go. This kid has a good life. If he saves his life, he will be lucky if he survives the disaster in the future. Seeing that there was no big deal here, Mr. Song called Su Tong to leave quickly. During this period, Su Tong asked Master Shuigoi's grave, "Is it not necessary to cover it up?" As a result, Mr. Song patted his shoulder with regret and explained, "It was just a stream of spiritual energy, and it is still transmitted into you. What is left is an empty tomb, and it is of no use keeping it." The only regret Mr. Song has is that this is one of the few things his master left to him, and now it is completely gone. "Master, if I read correctly, that driver is the one who drove us before. When you paid the bill, did you deliberately put a guide coin in your money?" Mr. Song did not deny this. "I thought something was wrong with him at the time. If he threw the money away, the gods would not be able to save him. Now that his life is not worthy of death, we have done a good thing." As for driving them out of the car, Mr. Song didn't care. He had lived to his age and had never seen any big winds and waves, so the driver would not be idle. On the way, Mr. Song didn't ask him if he had learned Bai Shan Kao. This skill was passed on to him, and it has been his skill since then, and he has finally been introduced to it. By the time the two of them got home, it was almost dawn, and Mr. Song went to bed early after struggling all night. After a while, Mr. Song's snoring could be heard in the room. Su Tong couldn't sleep. On the contrary, he felt energetic at the moment and began to lie on the bed and study Baishan button carefully. This is definitely a killer move created by Master Shuigui. It seems to be giving you a hand, but there is a curse in it. As long as the hand is cupped forward, the cursed person in front of him will be seriously injured as long as he is unprepared. But what he couldn't understand was that although he already understood the set of killing moves, he always felt that something was missing. He knew it but didn't know why. He didn't understand the principle at all, which made him feel a little strange in his heart. He wanted to call Mr. Song to ask what was going on. But seeing that Mr. Song was already asleep, and the old man had never learned this trick, Su Tong was not sure whether the old man understood the key to the problem. So after thinking about it, I finally remembered that today is the day of the exhibition. After thinking about it again, Gao Zhou also left himself a phone number. It was just right to ask him about this to see if this guy had any clues. Thinking of this, he immediately spent 2 script points to summon the script hall, preparing to enter the exhibition directly through the script hall. Of course, entering the club, no, before the script studio, I specially prepared a nice gift for the lovely receptionist sister. But he discovered it only after he walked into the script studio with great expectations. The front desk that he had longed for was no longer there. Instead, the host was sitting at the front desk, holding a cup of coffee, as if he was waiting for him here. "Don't look at it. She is on vacation today. If you have any good things, you might as well give them to me. It's not impossible for me to help you pass them on to her. Today, the host is wearing a luxurious dress and a top hat with bright flowers on her head, but compared with her beautiful appearance, it can only be reduced to a foil. It has to be said that this woman is a natural dresser. After putting on an outfit, she looks noble and elegant. Even the way she drinks coffee gives people a feeling that can only be seen from a distance and cannot be blasphemed. Seeing this, Su Tong sat generously on the chair at the front desk. He took a look and found that the table at the front desk was a lot shorter for some reason. No, I need to identify the prop card. Can you identify it? When facing the young lady at the front desk, Su Tong could always find ways to make her laugh, but facing the person in front of him, there was really no unnecessary expression on his face. He opened his mouth with a formulaic questioning voice, which made the host look depressed, but he couldn't get angry, so he could only grumble angrily, "The appraisal fee is 20 script points." Su Tong didn't waste any time and directly took out embers and polypoma and put them on the table. Seeing these two prop cards, the host frowned slightly, picked up the ember prop card and placed it on her chest, rubbed it lightly a few times and then placed it on the table. At this time, a wisp of black fire actually appeared on the prop card. Su Tong picked it up and took a look, and found that the active skills of the two question marks had now been unlocked. Active Skill 1, Extreme Flame Turbine. It consumes 20 script points. After activation, it summons corrosive fire, which forms a rapid spin in the palm of the hand, drawing enemies within 20 square meters around. At the same time, a huge amount of corrosive fire bursts out, attacking the target. Cooling time, 8 hours. Note, if the opponent's weight is 3 times greater than yours, please give up this skill, otherwise you will find that you will gain nothing except losing a script point. Active Skill 2, Black Kai's Wound. Spending 15 script points activating all attacks can increase the power of corrosive fire. Duration, 5 minutes. Cooling time, 2 hours. Note, after the Black Kai's Wound is activated, the probability of generating bone-attached fire increases by 30%. Please feel it yourself for details. Looking at these two skills, Su Tong's heart tightened. There is no doubt that this is a very powerful item card, and it does not conflict with the power of the devil. He can perfectly combine the two to exert a greater level. The power of. Just when Su Tong was excited about this, he heard the host in front of him say with a smile, "Actually, if it were me, the value of this prop card would make me happy for a longer time." As the host spoke, he placed the polypoma that still had body fragrance in front of Su Tong, and whispered in his ear, "I will charge 3 times for this prop card." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 172. After Su Tong heard this, he decisively pulled out the card and left without stopping at all. Triple charging is actually 60 script points, which is just like a drop of rain for me, who is currently responsible for thousands of script points. But if you have money, you won't spoil her like this. The sister at the front desk is not here today, so I can just come back another day. I'm not in a hurry anyway. Putting on his mask and striding towards the red door, he came to the exhibition again amid a burst of noise. Unlike last time, this time he didn't even pause and went straight to the overseas shopping area. It's still that simple area like a vegetable market. Various prop cards were placed on various stalls. Su Tong walked among them and looked around. His target was the dark prop card. Although this classification is not official, everyone has a tacit understanding to classify some prop cards as dark type, because most of these prop cards give you a strong increase, but the side effects are often prohibitive. It is not uncommon for this kind of props to be stuck in overseas shopping areas, and the inventory is even very large. Su Tong was not in a hurry to buy, but took a casual walk around. After seeing almost everything, he turned around and headed straight to the previous tavern. In the phone booth outside the pub, he first made a call to his old friend Yang Zixuan. After the phone rang a few times, I heard that familiar voice. "Old place, come quickly, I'll give you something good." After saying that, he hung up the phone regardless of whether Yang Zixuan responded, then sat in the same position as before, ordered a bottle of ice-cold white beer, and took a sip of it. The spicy and fruity taste was paired with the cold drink. It has a cool taste and makes you feel relaxed after one sip. After waiting for less than half an hour, Yang Zixuan hurried over. Although they were all wearing masks, Yang Zixuan could still recognize Su Tong at a glance. "The next time you hang up the phone, can you wait for me to say something before hanging up?" Yang Zixuan complained, then threw a cigar to Su Tong, but Su Tong threw it back, as if showing off his treasure, and put the hookah he asked for from Gao Zhou on the table. "Yours is too small and not as big as mine. Why don't I give you a taste and keep it to make you feel ecstatic?" Yang Zixuan shook his head and expressed his gratitude for such a big hookah. "Tell me, what is the good thing you said on the phone?" Yang Zixuan was smoking a cigar slowly. In fact, before coming here, he never believed that Su Tong could give him anything good. He even suspected that this guy was most likely here to cheat him out of the cigar. But now, looking at this guy holding a hookah pipe and puffing away smoke, I feel really curious. Su Tong did not beat around the bush and casually threw the 2 syringes to Yang Zixuan. Yang Zixuan picked them up and took a look. They were Super Potion 1 and 2 respectively. After taking a closer look at the 2 entries, a look of disappointment suddenly appeared on his face. "This thing has a particularly high increase in plot missions, but it only has 1/10 of the increase in our players' increase, which is almost negligible. Aren't you a breeding team? With this thing, you can organize a super team in the script world to protect your cute pigs." Su Tong took out 100 potions in one breath and said, "Quantity creates quality. It is enough for you to use so many potions in 2 times. Yang Zixuan couldn't help but nodded when he heard this. It was a good idea, but then he frowned and said, "Since it's so easy to use, why don't you keep it for yourself?" He could only helplessly take a deep sip and look up at the ceiling. "They say that kindness cannot control soldiers and justice cannot control wealth. It's just that I am too kind." "Bah, I believe you." Yang Zixuan would not believe his lies, but these things were indeed what Su Tong said he needed. During this time, he had recruited several pigs and was worried about how to protect them. Su Tong's medicines were naturally a timely help to him. "One more thing, if I know a player's real name, I want to find out if he has any particularly good methods." Sure enough, Su Tong's real purpose in finding Yang Zixuan was certainly not to sell the batch of potions in his hand. More importantly, he wanted to ask Yang Zixuan if he had found a way to find Chang Wahen. It's not difficult at all. It is said that there are some certified players who can kill the opponent with a curse just by knowing the opponent's name. They can even kill the opponent no matter how far away they are or whether they are in the script space. These people should have something on their hands. This ability to find people. Yang Zixuan dragged his chin and thought. As a result, Su Tong rolled his eyes, put away the potions on the table, stood up and was about to leave. "Hey! Don't go, don't go." Yang Zixuan hurriedly stopped him, and Su Tong snorted coldly, "We are both 1,000-year-old foxes, why are you pretending to me? If you can, just say don't go around in circles with me." "Yes, yes, yes." Yang Zixuan quickly grabbed him and said, "Well, you go to the west. There is a very special street over there called Witch Street. You can try astrology. I can't say it is 100% successful, but basically you have the same idea." "That's about right." Su Tong pushed the potion to Yang Zixuan, and Yang Zixuan was not stingy. He gave Su Tong a full 600 script points for 100 potions. Sure enough, the breeding team is still rich. After Yang Zixuan left, Su Tong started looking for the so-called Witch Street, but he couldn't find it. Instead, he found a very strange shop on a corner. The name of the store is Minky Grocery Store, but what attracts him is not the sign, but the couplet on the door. The first couplet is, seeking survival, seeking Tao, and seeking immortality are ultimately 3 feet of Lois. The second couplet is, money, earth, and the palace of Hades will not be known until death. Looking at this couplet, Su Tong couldn't help but be curious about this store. He opened the door and walked in. He saw that the furnishings in the store were very simple, but the shelves were filled with a dazzling array of strange things. At this moment, he suddenly saw a money mold on the shelf. He reached out and took it down to take a look, and his heartbeat suddenly accelerated a lot. This is indeed a money mold, and it's not the one he has that can only be used as a guide. It was the molds of those ghost coins that I got from Fatty when I first entered the world of scripts. Thinking back to the first script world, Old Man Wang finally summoned the 2 sinister gods Black and White Vuchang and Siakifanba to burn paper ingots desperately. As a result, there was no movement from these 2 people, and the money couldn't even be burned no matter how much they burned. In the end, he took out the money and sent it to him. Suddenly, there was a big fire. The 2 men showed mercy and gave Old Man Wang's son a chance to live. I didn't think much of it at the time, but later I realized how precious the money I gave him was. Thinking about the inheritance of the Wang family, one can fold paper into silver and bribe ghosts, but the sum of so much paper and silver is not as valuable as a few thin ghost notes in the end. Now that I actually saw the mold of Ming Chao here, how could I not be excited? If I could print Ming Chao, wouldn't that mean I had acquired the ability to make money? Just imagine that in the future, you can summon a bull-headed horse with a black and white face, throw a stack of ghost money on it, and all the ghosts and evil spirits will call you Grandpa. Su Tong thought wonderfully, but unfortunately, it would have been better if there was no hole the size of a table tennis ball in the middle of the mold. While he was looking at it, he heard the tapping sound of an abacus behind him, and the shopkeeper standing at the counter raised his head and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, you have good eyesight. You reached out and got the most precious thing in our store." Su Tong frowned, walked up to the boss and said, "No matter how precious something is, if it has a hole, it can only be trash." Hearing the boss pause while moving his fingers, he raised his head and looked around him with a pair of triangular eyes. Then he shook his head and said, "Although the words are not bad, they are not absolute. There are countless experts in the world. Maybe someone can fill this hole. There are countless experts, but those who can be found easily are mostly just trying to make up the numbers. Even if you find them, you can make up for them as you please. Then you are still an expert." The boss frowned when he heard this, and then dialed 2 beads on the abacus before saying, "Everything has a fate. Your guest bought this thing today because of the cause. Since there is a cause, there must be good consequences. That's because you haven't seen the dangers in the world. You accept this thing as a cause, and selling it to me is a good effect. If you can't sell it, it's a bad effect. In the end, this thing is still an evil effect. If you don't buy it, leave." At the end, Su Tong put the things back, turned around and walked out. The boss didn't stop him, he just frowned and dialed another bead on the abacus before saying, 100 script points. Su Tong, who walked to the door, took a step back and glanced at the abacus in the boss's hand. "I'll give you this number, so give me the thing on the side." What Su Tong was referring to was the red writing brush on the shelf. The tip of the writing brush had been destroyed, leaving only a few hairs standing there. It seems that nothing in this store is complete. That's a judgment pen. It was used by Emperor Jiajing of the Ming dynasty. Even if it's an antique, it's not worth this price. The boss was anxious, but let him brag as much as he wanted, and Su Tong insisted on the price. The boss talked for half an hour, and his mouth went dry. Su Tong chuckled, casually dropped a script and gave it to the boss. Just think of it as tea. In fact, it doesn't matter whether he buys something or not. He just wants to see how many tricks the boss can come up with. Seeing the boss wishing to blow the pen to the sky and the earth and dancing, he thinks it's better than crosstalk. Seeing that the boss was running out of words and couldn't speak, Su Tong was about to leave. No, 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 I'll pay this price and let's just make friends. When the boss saw that he was really leaving, he gritted his teeth and could only agree. If I don't agree, I'm really sorry that he talked about it for half an hour. These two items were thrown into the prop book by Su Tong and showed that they were damaged, but there was no other information. He didn't feel anything to regret about this, he just regarded it as a collection and hung it up in his room when he got back. Even if it was just a decoration, it would be good. After he left the shop, he planned to go to Witch Street to try his luck and see if he could find traces of Unfettered. Finally, we finally found the so-called Witch Street. Unfortunately, the store was closed today. There is also a sign hanging on the door, with a line of handwriting written on it, "Today there is a bloody disaster, the door will be closed." Seeing this sign, Su Tong was stunned for a moment. He could only silently take out a pen from his pocket and add the word 7 days after closure. If you want to rest, rest well, why do you need to make people suspicious like this? But now that they are resting, I can only give up the idea of looking for Chang Liuja temporarily. After some thought, he dialed Gao Zhou's phone number and made an appointment with him to listen to a play in a tea house. Gao Zhou had actually been waiting for this call from him for a long time. After receiving the call, he hurried over. The two sat on a loose chair, sipping the fragrant tea in the cup, and chatted casually. "You tell me how many real things Mr. Song has passed on to you, and whether he has already introduced you to it." Gao Zhou curiously inquired about Su Tong's apprenticeship. In response, Su Tong just said yes, but he didn't say anything, which made Gao Zhou scratch his hair anxiously. "Can you come to our Xiangzi? I want to ask you to do a favor." "Don't worry, our family will be very grateful after this matter is completed." Xiangzi. Su Tong frowned. He hadn't finished handling his matters in L City, so he was running to Xiangzi. Besides, even if he agreed, Mr. Song would not agree. "I have just started, and I don't know how much homework I have to do. I haven't even finished reading the book Theory of Adjusting the Spirit, so I don't have the energy to go to Western Hunan." But then again, Gao Zhou's strength is not bad, and there is nothing he needs his help with. Faced with Su Tong's rejection, Gao Zhou could only explain it to him honestly. He looked straight and said, "To tell you the truth, if you are really of Mr. You can't fly away, this is what your family owes to our family." "Oh." Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly and turned his head to look at Gao Zhou. "To tell you the truth, my old man and your master went to a ghost cave together. It was this trip that caused my old man to lose one of his 3 souls and 7 souls. It was your master who boiled the ink of resentment into a pill. It was a temporary makeup." The resentful ink that Gao Zhou was talking about was the black liquid that Mr. Song had drawn from the corpse before. He didn't expect that this thing could have such an effect. Although Su Tong was deeply surprised, he also believed Gao Zhou's words. "Later I said that I would go down again when I had the chance to help my old man get that soul back. But then the mission murder case broke out. Your master heard the news and left as soon as he said he wanted to. My old man, that soul has not been recovered yet." "Oh." Hearing this, Su Tong couldn't help but his eyes lit up and asked, "What you are talking about can't be from 1968, right? You know." Gao Zhou sat up and saw Su Tong waved his hand and casually told him about meeting Master Shuigui on the train. After speaking, he said to Gao Zhou, "I have a special mission here. It seems that I have to go back to that place. Let's go to the old days, how about we come together?" It was originally a joke, but Gao Zhou was shocked when he heard it. He waved his hands repeatedly and said, No, 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 I won't go. I'm crazy. This is the last carnival in the end of the Dharma era. Everyone is a ruthless person. I'll eat it. Are you so full that you come to this kind of script to find excitement? I won't go, I won't go. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 173. Just kidding, their old man survived that turbulent era. I remember that when he was still alive, he often talked about that era with younger generations like them. Every time when he talked about those old things, the old man would pat his juniors on the head and say with envy, "It's great to live in New China." From this sentence, it is not difficult to see how hard it was to live in that era. Are you going to be so exaggerated? No matter how scary it is, can it be scarier than zombies? Seeing his exaggerated expression, Su Tong couldn't help but joked. No. Gao Zhou's expression became serious. He drank a cup of tea and said in a low voice, "In all dynasties, when a country is about to perish, monsters must appear. From Xia to Qing, there are no exceptions. However, only the late Qing dynasty was the most turbulent, and monsters and evil ways emerged in endlessly." Gao Zhou couldn't help but shudder when he said this. To outsiders, this was just a story, but in the eyes of people with heritage like them, this was outrageous. It's not right. At this time, Su Tong interrupted him, "You are talking about the Republic of China, why not? Don't worry, just listen to what I have to say." Gao Zhou repeatedly waved his hand to quiet Su Tong, and then continued, "As the saying goes, prosperity and decline, under the will of the times, many people who defy heaven are scum, so many evil ways and righteous ways are mostly hiding." Speaking of this, Gao Zhou took a deep puff from the hookah and said, "Think about those old monsters from the Republic of China, who were not ruthless and scheming masters. You might not be able to see the brain when you peel off the lost head. If you open the heads of these monsters, you can at least see a V6 engine, so I advise you, it's better not to join in the fun." In fact, Su Tong said the same thing, but as soon as Gao Zhou introduced it, Su Tong's heart became excited. How could he not participate in such an interesting script? Must go. And he couldn't go by himself. Gao Zhou, a know-it-all, had to go with him. After all, it would be much more convenient for him to have such a know-it-all with him. After thinking about it, Su Tong smoked a few water pipes, blew out a huge smoke ring in mid-air, and then said, "By the way, why did you come to me?" "Help my old man find his lost soul." Gao Zhou told Su Tong the story again. Their old man had been dead for several years, but his soul was not intact and could not be reincarnated, and he had been trapped in the earthly world. The family hired an expert to make a clay statue of the old man, so that he could withstand the fireworks at their house, but this was not a long-term solution after all, so he needed to get Yupo back. But in this matter, firstly, you need someone you can trust, and secondly, this person must be capable, otherwise you will be seeking your own death if you find that ghost cave. This matter was dragged on until Gao Zhou met Su Tong. The two didn't get along for a long time, but Gao Zhou could still clearly see Su Tong's character. At least in the face of interests, this guy can stick to his bottom line as a person, not interests. For this reason, Gao Zhou trusts him enough. After listening to Gao Zhou's words, he slapped his thigh and said, "That's it, you accompany me to complete the mission script, and I will go to Western Hunan with you." "Hey! You! Don't be afraid of you and me, gentlemen, don't be cowardly, it will be over if you are reckless." Gao Zhou knew that Su Tong was putting himself on the line, so he hesitated again and again, but finally reluctantly agreed. The two signed a temporary team contract. In order to show respect for Gao Zhou's opinion, he specifically gave up the position of captain to Gao Zhou. After the two agreed, Gao Zhou didn't leave. He simply accompanied him to the theater to listen to the play, and casually chatted about Master Shuigui's affairs. Most of them were rumors, but he also listened with interest. The two stayed at the exhibition for 3 days, then said goodbye to each other and left. Before leaving, Su Tong went to the overseas shopping area and prepared to look around to see if he could find a suitable weapon for himself. In the past 3 days, he carefully sorted out the prop cards on his body and found that he did not need to add new prop cards for the time being. Because there are already a lot of prop cards in hand, in addition to the increase in dark ability, there is also an increase in fire ability. With the increase of mixed martial arts, Ember, Demon Power and Dark Physique, the 4 prop cards make his Dark Fire ability enough to give him powerful melee fighting ability. Leopard Soul Cloak and Magic Change Fat Paper give him a strong ability to protect himself and escape. Prop cards such as Evil Bell, Papermaker's Book, and Star Eye Tribulation provide considerable auxiliary power. Now he needs a more convenient weapon, and this weapon is preferably a gun or a long knife, so that his shortcomings in mid-range attacks can be made up for. Walking east and west in the overseas shopping area, there are a dazzling array of treasures here, but it is indeed not easy to find a suitable weapon. He also tried, quickly selecting through the auction system above his head, and found a lot of weapons, but the price was unacceptable to him. It's not that he can't afford it, but it's too expensive. As Gao Zhou said, the script they were about to go to was far more dangerous than the previous one. What he faced was definitely not a cute zombie, but a human being. No, it should be said that he was Voldemort who survived from the late Qing dynasty. Therefore, it is more reassuring to have enough scripts. Spending such a large amount of script points to purchase a weapon is not a good deal after thinking about it. So he could only be empty-handed. No, he bought some things before leaving. There was a banquet waiting on the table. He went back and gave Mr. Song a taste to show his filial piety. It was really hot and he was lazy and didn't want to cooking. Mr. Song was also tired last night and did not wake up until Su Tong came back. He was still snoring in the room. Seeing this, he didn't call Mr. Song, and started to study the book on adjusting spirits. While reading, he thought about the method of worshipping Shankao. The book Tiao Shen Lun was very boring at first, but when you really read it, you found that this book is indeed the foundation of spiritual practice. It explains in detail the structure of Jing Qi Shen. After reading this book and thinking about Beishan Kao, I suddenly had a different feeling. I saw him sitting on the edge of the bed, with his hands folded, thinking back to the first time he met his master Shuigui on the train. A feeling of bliss suddenly came to his heart, as if a hand was placed on his elbow and he gently relaxed it. For a moment, Su Tong felt that his spirit was like a torrent as he bowed forward, and the bowls on the table in front of him fell apart with a bang. It's done. His eyes lit up. Although it was just a broken bowl, if this move hit someone by surprise, it would be enough for anyone to drink a pot. The most important thing is that there is no need to consume script points. And isn't this just one rack A? There are 2 more rack AHS to come. If it goes on for 3 rack AHS, even the players won't be able to bear it. Just as he was about to continue trying, a strong feeling of dizziness hit him. My head was in pain as if it had been hammered. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before I finally regained my breath. When I thought about the theory on regulating the spirit that I had just read, I immediately realized that I had hurt my soul. Fortunately, there were ways to nourish the spirit at the back of the book. I closed my eyes and lay down to adjust my breathing. I followed the rhythm described in the book and lay still. Fall asleep in bed. Tiao Shen Lun is not a monastic book, but it is not entirely a medical book. To be more precise, it is more like a hardcover version of the Huangdi Niajing. This book accurately explains issues such as essence, energy, internal organs, and the harmony of the 4 seasons. To use a subtle metaphor, this is similar to the fact that most martial arts masters are proficient in medical skills. As he fell asleep, Su Tong suddenly felt someone pushing his arm vaguely beside him. He opened his eyes in a daze, only to see a blur in front of him, as if there was a figure shaking in front of his bed a few times. When he opened his eyes and looked carefully, the figure was gone. But strangely, the door to his room was opened. Someone. In an instant, Su Tong's pupils tightened, and he suddenly woke up. He had accidentally injured himself before and was sleeping very soundly, but that didn't mean that anyone could walk into his room. I quickly jumped out of bed and walked out to take a look. I saw that it was pitch dark outside and there was no light in the yard. What's even weirder is that his dark vision has just failed here. Tanjir. Just when Su Tong was trying to call out the prop book, he suddenly heard a shout coming from Mr. Song's room, but the voice was not Mr. Song's voice, but a woman's voice. Suddenly he felt even more confused. He walked to the door, picked up the curtain with his fingers, and looked inside sideways. Just one glance immediately made Su Tong's head buzz, and a cool breeze blew over, as if it was going through his collar. When the cool breeze blew, goosebumps stood up all over Su Tong's body. I saw that the room was dimly lit by candlelight, and a table of good wine and food was placed on the big round table that was never used. 2 children were running up and down the hall. A woman wearing a large cotton-padded jacket with red flowers and green bottoms was standing in front of the table, busy placing dishes and chopsticks. As if she had noticed something, the woman turned around, with a strange smile on her pale face, and said to Su Tong, who was hiding at the door, "Why don't you come over to help me? I'm waiting for my wife to invite you." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 174. Su Tong took a look. Wasn't that his wife? With his rosy eyes, double eyelids, slender eyebrows, and blush on his cheeks, the good guy looks exactly like the lady sitting in the chair. Hearing his wife's shout, his heart tightened, but he quickly stepped into the door, walked forward obediently, and took the chopsticks from his wife's hand. At the same time, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that Mr. Chen was still sleeping. After looking suspicious for a moment, he said cautiously, "Master's wife, my master hasn't gotten up yet." As he said that, he took the opportunity to look at his wife again, and saw that the face of the wife in front of him was pale, but she had a bit more vitality than usual. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't know she was a paper doll. Then let him sleep for a while. The mistress looked back at Mr. Song, with such affectionate eyes, she forced Su Tong to stuff a mouthful of dog food. "Master wife, how are you alive?" Su Tong was also extremely brave. If he had seen this, he would have been scared to death. However, he showed no fear at all. Instead, he stared at the master's wife's face curiously and carefully. The teacher's wife looked a little embarrassed and snorted coldly, "You have been coming to our house for so many days. It's rare that you left the Yinshan today and happened to help me with some work. As the saying goes, go to the south to go to the yin, and to the north to invite the gods. The meaning of walking in the yin is that the soul leaves the body and goes to the underworld and then comes back up. A skilled mage can lift the soul of the deceased to the earth and communicate with the deceased by sending messages or physically communicating with the deceased. This is also called a wanderer. But occasionally there are some people who, unintentionally or carelessly, lose their yin shen. There is such a little story. It was said that Zhang San came to work in a new factory. After working overtime all day at night, he was so tired that he accidentally walked into the wrong building. This building was very dilapidated and there were several strange co-workers living in it. These workers were quite enthusiastic and asked Zhang San to come and have a drink together. Zhang San was also very happy, so he drank while sitting down. After drinking too much, he lay down and fell asleep. When I opened my eyes the next day, I found that all my co-workers were gone, so I got up and went to work. But when he went to work, the people in the dormitory asked him where he had gone after not going back all night. Jong-san explained what had happened, and when everyone looked for it again, they found that there was no such building. After asking more carefully, I found out that there used to be a building here, but it had been demolished a few years ago. This is Jong-san accidentally leaving the Yinshen. In reality, such cases are by no means rare. However, Su Tong's situation today is quite special. He did not go anywhere else. Instead, he was at his own home. He was just motionless on weekdays. "Wife, you are alive today." After understanding his situation, Su Tong was relieved. He was not worried about anything. How could his mistress harm him? As the mistress said, he had been here for so long and it was indeed his duty to help his mistress with some work. When guests come, you go to the kitchen and boil some eggs. The master's wife said that she didn't know where to take out a basket of eggs for him. Su Tong took it and waited, and found that the basket of eggs was actually lighter than paper. But when he took it in his hand, he saw that it was indeed an egg. Now he began to murmur in his heart, but at the urging of his mistress, he walked to the kitchen and started throwing the eggs into the pot to boil them. While I was boiling eggs, I heard a burst of laughter behind me. When he looked back, he found two children lying in front of the kitchen door looking at him. Don't look at the young age of the two children. I remember Mr. Song said that if the two children's brothers and sisters really started to care about each other, he would call them uncle or aunt. But children are children. When Su Tong looked over, he immediately ran away shyly. However, a moment later, he saw the girl running over, waving to him, beckoning him to come forward. Su Tong leaned over and heard the girl saying in his ear, "If you are scared later, put the bottom of the pot in the pot, put ashes on your face so they don't see you." They. Just when he wanted to ask clearly who they were, the girl turned around and ran away. This couldn't help but make him more and more confused. He didn't know who the guest mentioned by the master's wife was. With doubts, he took out the boiled eggs and brought them to his wife. She picked up an egg and threw it into the wine bottle on the table. With a pop, the egg fell into the bottle. After putting an egg into each of the 6 wine bottles, the mistress felt at ease. She turned around and pointed to the kitchen and said, "Quick, get ready to hide. No matter what happens, don't come out. When the rooster crows, you will come back, go to your room, close your eyes and continue to sleep, and you will be able to return to Yang soon." Su Tong wanted to ask the reason, but the sound of gongs was heard outside the door. Seeing this, the teacher's wife hurriedly pushed him to the kitchen, arranged her clothes, took a few deep breaths, then showed a smiling face, and went forward to open the courtyard door. As soon as the courtyard door opened, a thin man walked in first carrying a gong. Su Tong hid behind the crack in the door and took a look. This man looked very similar to his master Shuigui. This man was not his master, nor was he a relative of Mr. Song. Instead, Mr. Song copied his master's appearance when he was young. 1. The man walked with stiff limbs, far less natural than the master's wife and others. He held a gong in his hand and struck it every step of the way. Boom, boom, boom. After knocking the gong several times, he saw 3 people in white clothes outside the door slowly walking in, followed by 3 people in black clothes. The 6 of them walked in a swaying way, as if they were riding balance bikes. After taking a closer look, I realized that these 6 guys were extremely ugly and short, like dwarfs. Their skin and flesh were so loose that they were almost drooping on the ground. "Hey, the 6 adults are finally here. The food is ready. If you have anything to do, please eat first." The mistress hurriedly came over to greet him and said with a smile on her face, "Humph, you've been waiting for so long and you're just sending us away with a meal? Today we have to take this old guy away. If you dare to stop us, don't blame the yin-yang sticks in our hands for being rude." The one headed by the 6 people wore a white high hat with the word bad written on it. Are they ghost agents from the underworld? Su Tong hid behind the door and watched, feeling a little surprised. Judging from what they mean, could it be that they want to take Mr. Song away? Just when he was guessing in his mind, the mistress had already invited them into the room. As they walked, she said, "How dare you, how dare you? I'm just worried that the 6 adults will have a long journey, so I prepared a small banquet of wine and banquet. If the 6 adults don't, let's talk about it after eating this." The leader Goicha hesitated for a moment, but did not say he disagreed, because the master's wife had already stuffed a thick bag of money into Goicha's trouser pocket. Sure enough, money can make the world go round, this saying is absolutely true. After collecting the money, Goicha glanced at the pawns behind him and walked into the room. Su Tong turned his head and heard the sound of drinking and guessing. Could it be said that Mr. Song has been using this method to forcefully extend his life? Judging from the relaxed demeanor of the master's wife, it seems that this is not a once or twice happened. Song Lao is always using this method to bribe ghosts. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. He had just found a family, but he didn't expect that Mr. Song's time seemed to be running out, and he would even use this method to extend his life. Just when Su Tong was thinking wildly, he saw his wife being pushed out of the door suddenly. Immediately after, the ghost leader who just headed out rushed out of the door. He grabbed the master's wife's arm and pulled him towards the side of the house. My lord, you have violated the rules of the underworld, and you are going to be plunged into hell." The master's wife kept dodging Goicha's hand, pushing back step by step, reminding her as she stepped back. But today the ghost seems to be a little over the top. His eyes flashed with evil light. Hearing this, he sneered and said, "Who are you trying to scare? The underworld won't take back the gangsters like you. You can't even get in through the gates of the city of waste. Let's help you. How many times have the Men family hid, and you just dismiss them every time with a meal of food and wine? Sir, just be kind and we will follow you next time." Haha, next time? If you obey me obediently this time, there will be no next time. As he spoke, Goicha pushed the master's wife into the room. When Su Tong saw this while hiding in the kitchen, his eyes suddenly turned cold. If it were someone else's matter, he wouldn't bother to care about it, but his own mistress dared to touch it. If he didn't care about it, it would mean that the lord had deceived him. He glanced left and right, and suddenly remembered that the girl had said in his ear that the ashes at the bottom of the pot could make the ghosts invisible to him. Thinking of this, he raised his eyebrows slightly and quickly spit the ashes from the pot on himself, then picked up the kitchen knife on the chopping board and walked towards the room with a cold face. But as soon as he approached the door and was about to push it in, he heard a low wailing sound suddenly coming from the room. Su Tong was startled and hurriedly opened the door and rushed in. As a result, when he opened the door, he saw his mistress sitting on the bed, holding the ghost's head in her arms, chewing on it with relish. Seeing Su Tong walking in with a knife, the mistress was dumbfounded, wiped her mouth, and said angrily, "Didn't you say, don't come out?" Su Tong stood in front of the door and was stunned for 3 seconds before saying, "Would you like some ketchup?" Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 175. Facts have proved that the master's wife has a good appetite and does not need ketchup. After a few mouthfuls, the ghost's head was eaten until only an empty shell was left. He took out a piece of silk from his sleeve, folded a triangle in his hand and gently wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. While wiping, he looked at Su Tong and the kitchen knife in his hand. "You don't really think that this little bastard can do anything to me?" The master's wife covered her mouth and chuckled. No, master's wife has great magical powers and boundless magic power. It's unnecessary for my disciple to worry." Su Tong had a bright smile on his face, and he just needed to write the words obedient and obedient on his face. He glanced at Goichi's body, only to see that the body turned into a puff of smoke and gradually dispersed in front of him. The master's wife flicked her long sleeves and immediately gathered the green smoke into a ball, turned it into a blue glass bead, and threw it to him. There was a sneaky sneer in his mouth and he said, "This Goichi has 100 years of Taoism at least. It is just when he is about to transform into a ghost leader. It is his fate that I eat him. This Mingyuan is a good thing. It is a gift to you, a greeting gift from my wife." The mistress's airy tone always made him feel like a water town in the south of the Yangtze River. However, the mistress's tall physique, broad shoulders, and round hips were obviously the characteristics of northern women. When I took the so-called Mingyuan and took a look, I saw that it was ice cold in my hand. The feeling of holding it in my hand was like putting an old popsicle in my mouth, and my whole body felt cold and refreshing. "Master wife, how do you use this thing?" Because he couldn't call up the props book at this moment, he could only ask the teacher's wife beside him for advice. "Put it under your pillow every day when you sleep. It nourishes your soul and stabilizes your soul. It is the best choice. Pack it in a cloth bag when you go home. Remember not to show it off, otherwise you will get into trouble and I can't protect you." The master's wife crossed her legs and warned her again and again. After all, Mingyuan was not visible to the public. If Su Tong hadn't arrived suddenly today, she would not have given it to him rashly. Su Tong put Mingyuan away, rolled his eyes, and asked tentatively, "Master, you still love me, but if we kill Gaza, there won't be any problem, right?" From the previous conversation between the two, he heard clearly that this ghost messenger had come here not only once but twice, and he had not taken away the master's soul several times. The master's wife just started killing him today. If it was said that it was just because this guy was greedy for the beauty of the master's wife, then he wouldn't believe it. Humph, as long as no one goes back to report the information, even the 10th Palace Lord Yama will not be able to find out what the ghost is. As the master's wife said this swornly, she heard a sound coming from outside the door. Su Tong opened the door a crack and took a look outside. "I saw a large pot set up in the yard at some point, and in the pot was gurgling hot oil that was bubbling." Looking again, the two children were holding a hemp rope and pulling 5 drunken imps out of the house. These little devils loved to eat eggs, so the mistress deliberately stuffed the eggs into the wine bottle. The little devils were so greedy that they couldn't wait to eat the eggs, so they drank heavily until they drank all the wine. As a result, the egg was not eaten, and he was already drunk. 2 dolls held the rope, pulled it out like a gourd, and pushed it into the oil pan, turning it into a fried ghost in a daze. The little ghost was fried in oil, like melted dough. The 2 children took it out, kneaded it into a ball, put it in the mouth and ate it. The sticky texture was the same as eating glutinous rice cake. Good guy, Su Tong's heart skipped a beat. This master's wife is not a good person, and these 2 children are not good either. His master said that his wife's family had been married to his family since they were young, but his family was just an ordinary family. Now it seems that they are an ordinary family. This is simply the underworld version of Sun Erniang from Shuabo Liangshan. With the addition of these 2 dolls, if I want to be normal, I am the most normal one. At this time, there was a rooster crow outside. It's strange to say that although most of the houses in the old city are built by one's own family and have houses and courtyards, I have lived here for so long and I have never heard of anyone raising a rooster. Just as he was thinking about it, he heard the master's wife say, "The time is almost here, go to bed and rest quickly. Don't tell your master what happened tonight." The master's wife stood up and walked out, and walked to Su Tong's side. She hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help but stop moving forward, as if she was troubled by something. It wasn't until a moment later that she said, "Your master has not been in good health recently. You have to be my disciple. Be careful, external application alone may not be enough, you may need to find some internal medicine. As soon as the master's wife said this, she walked out of the door without waiting for Su Tong's reaction. He thought about it carefully and suddenly realized, so that's what it means. He was lying on the bed in a daze. He didn't know what time it was. When he opened his eyes, the sky outside was already misty and bright. Looking at the bright sunshine and blue sky and white clouds outside the door, Su Tong raised his eyebrows and opened his hand to see that the Ming Yuan given to him by his wife was actually in his hand. It seemed to remind him that everything last night was not his fault. Dream. Seeing this, he casually threw the thing into the prop book, and soon the entry for the thing appeared in front of him. Minjai Yuan. The ghost soul is granted power and is a messenger from the underworld. Although it is not subject to the incense of the human world, it is nourished by the yin virtues. After hundreds of years, it will finally be transformed into vitality, and it will be condensed into the underworld. The holder's mental power continues to improve, which has an excellent nourishing effect on the soul and spirit. Note: Ming Yuan is a forbidden object in the underworld. Once discovered, it will be reported to the underworld at that time. The bull-headed and horse-faced black and white faces will definitely come to investigate. This thing is just as the master's wife said, it is definitely a good thing. Su Tong thought about it and simply threw it into his prop book without fear of losing it. Just as I was thinking about it, I heard Mr. Song's voice coming from the house. Oh, isn't this a waste of time? Su Tong hurriedly walked into the room. When he raised his head, he first looked at the teacher's wife sitting on the chair. At this moment, I saw the mistress, sitting on the chair as usual, with a subtle expression. She looked like a living person. If he hadn't experienced what happened last night, he might not have cared about it, but after what happened last night, when he looked at this mistress now, he couldn't help but start to murmur in his heart. Oh, why didn't you call me? Look at the dishes on this table. I haven't even touched my chopsticks yet. The food I put on this night is already smelly. At this time, Mr. Song shouted to him. He saw Mr. Song holding the chopsticks and fidgeting with the food a few times. He reluctantly tried to pick up a chopstick, but when he reached his mouth, a sour taste hit him and he could only put it away. The chopsticks were thrown back on the table. Su Tong came over and took a look. The table of food in front of him had only been here for one night, but at this moment, it already had a rancid smell. It's not that the food is bad. If you take a closer look, you can't tell much about the food except the smell, but it just makes you lose your appetite. In all likelihood, it was because of those brats last night. Su Tong thought about it and realized what was going on. After all, people would definitely not be able to eat the food that this ghost had eaten. Seeing Mr. Song's distressed look, he quickly comforted him. Master, if you can't eat it, you can't eat it. It's just right. I'll pack it up and take you to a good place today. Good place. Song Lai curled his lips. He was a native of L City. What good place had he not been to? He immediately curled his lips and said with disdain, can you tell me a good place that I don't know about? Are you familiar with the big health club? Su Tong's eyes widened, and he casually turned his peripheral vision in the direction of his wife. He. Song Long pointed at Su Tong's head. Boy, you know nothing. The club is all fake. When I played this trick, you didn't know where you were. You go to the club, and the trend is like sand. Dance, do you understand? Sand dance. Su Tong pretended to be confused on his face, and when he squinted his eyes, he saw a cold light flashing in the gray eyes of the master's wife. Seeing that the old man was about to tell him about his romantic anecdotes back then, Su Tong quickly stopped Mr. Song and said, No, 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 it's getting late. I won't joke with you anymore. I'll take you to try 3 Dan mutton soup. There are countless soup restaurants in L City. Those with poor craftsmanship will not survive in 3 months, while all the streets with good ones are pointing at others to divert traffic. There are many soup restaurants with good mutton soup, but not many that are famous. For example, Sandan, Taigzi, and Bai mutton soup restaurants have golden names. However, when the old man heard this, he frowned, but didn't say anything. He nodded, put on clean clothes, took Sutong into the car, and headed straight for Longmen Avenue. When we got there, the old man didn't get out of the car. Instead, he asked the driver to walk about 100 meters ahead, and the car stopped at a small intersection. Pointing to an inconspicuous sign at the intersection, he smiled at Sutong and said, "Boy, today I want you to try what is called good soup." As he said that, he led him inside. A few steps ahead, there was a tin shed with a table set up outside. Just looking at this store made people frown. It's more of a temporary tin shed than a store. In addition, demolition is going on around the place, so if there wasn't a sign with the word soup written on it at the door, one would really wonder if this is a temporary dormitory for the demolition team. However, the old man didn't care about this at all. He took Sutong in and saw a boiling broth boiling in a large iron pot. The broth is different from other restaurants. It's milky white and there's a layer of bright red fat on the surface of the soup. Just looking at it makes people itch. The price is not expensive. The soup costs Rmb 10 per person. It contains about 7 or 8 pieces of mutton, sprinkled with seasonings, a handful of chopped green onions, and then a ladle of boiling mutton soup is poured down. The soup stirs up the fragrance of the chopped green onions, making it immediately fragrant. Not to mention taking a mouthful of fresh soup, Sutong immediately felt as if his tongue was alive. It was full of umami and sweet in the mouth. Paired with a big sesame seed cake, it was simply a great enjoyment in the world. "Old man, how did you find such a remote place?" Sutong asked while eating. "I just heard the old man blowing on the soup bowl, drinking it in one sip, and pointed to Guanghua Temple not far away. Sometimes I can't sleep, I often get up and go there to do some errands, and when I come back hungry, I just have a meal." Sutong glanced in the direction of Guanghua Temple and couldn't help but wonder, "What are you doing running all the way here?" Mr. Song chuckled and whispered 2 words in Sutong's ear, "Hit people." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 176. Sutong was also very good at beating people up to the temple. Mr. Song didn't explain much. After the two of them had eaten happily, Mr. Song took him straight to Guanghua Temple. El City has been the ancient capital of the Celestial Dynasty since ancient times. Especially during the prosperous Tang Dynasty, Empress Wu was fond of Buddhism and pushed Buddhism to a new height. In the late Yuan Dynasty, the rise of Buddhism was unstoppable, and there were tens of millions of people in El City. It is said that Guanghua Temple was also built during the prosperous Tang Dynasty, but it is not the Zen sect, but the ancestral home of Yoga Tantra and Japanese Tantra. It sounds like it has a great reputation, but when you actually walk to the door, you find that the temple is pitifully small. It is just built against the ridge of Longmen West Mountain. Few people know that this is a temple without looking carefully. The ticket price was 5 yuan, but when the person who bought the ticket looked at Mr. Song, his face turned dark instantly. He quickly closed the ticket window, picked up the phone and started calling people. Sutong vaguely heard the female conductor shouting, "That old madman is here again, let the host hide." About 5 minutes later, Sutong saw an old monk who looked to be in his 80s hurriedly walking down holding a string of Buddhist beads. Looking at his rapid pace, he was really worried that the old guy would miss the mark and fall over him. The old monk came in a hurry, walked to the door, clasped his hands and shouted to Mr. Song, "Old senior, my master is not here, so why don't you please come back?" The old monk looks to be in his 80s, but in front of Mr. Song, he still calls himself a junior, which shows how senior Mr. Song is. This can't help but remind Su Tong that when Gao Zhou learned that he was Song's old apprentice, he reluctantly called himself uncle. In fact, he was right. Mr. Song is not very powerful, but he is also Shuegui's apprentice. Even for Shuegui's sake, everyone will give him a little less favor. In addition, this old guy is so lively that in terms of seniority, there are really not many people who can say he is higher than him. For example, the old abbot of Guanghua Temple is 8 or 9 years younger than Mr. Song. But every time I brought it up, I was so angry that I cursed the Lord of Hell for being blind. Why didn't he just take this old thief away? Hey, you look nervous. Go tell the bald man that I won't beat him today and tell him to get out. Mr. Song was not polite at all when he spoke. The security guard on the side stared at Mr. Song like bells, as if he was about to rush up at any time. But the conductor on the side quietly told the security guard that the last security guard who rushed up not only ended up in the hospital on the spot, but was also fired from the temple the next day. This mighty and unyielding security guard immediately put down his baton. His sharp eyes began to wander around. The old monk looked at Mr. Song suspiciously. His triangular eyes were full of suspicion, and it was obvious that he did not completely believe Mr. Song's words. But in the end, he took out his mobile phone and made a call before finally signaling the security guard to open the door and invite Mr. Song to come in. As soon as he entered the door, Mr. Song pointed at Su Tong and said, "My apprentice, if you are young, call me senior brother." The second part of Mr. Song's sentence was for Su Tong. This was such a cheap time. How could he miss it? He quickly called the old monk in front of him, "Senior brother," in a sweet voice. For a moment, the old monk's face turned dark. When his senior brother called him down, the dozen or so disciples in his temple were suddenly shorter than Su Tong by a generation. But old man Song was watching from the side, and the old monk could only nod in agreement with an aggrieved look on his face. It doesn't matter if you don't agree, the old monk will regret it as soon as he agrees. As soon as he entered the temple, Su Tong stood beside him in a swaggering manner. One moment he said that the decoration of the temple at his senior brother's house was good, and the next he asked him again, "Senior brother, what is this place used for?" Especially in crowded places, this guy wants to attract everyone's attention and tell everyone how amazing his transcendent seniority is. The middle-aged people who were meditating in the Jialan hall suddenly changed their expressions when they saw their master being hugged by a young man. They were about to scold him, but they didn't know that the other person said senior brother and they were stunned. The most terrifying thing was that his master actually nodded in agreement. Suddenly, several people's faces turned red and blue, and one face turned red from suppressing it. Finally, in Su Tong's proud eyes, he reluctantly lowered his head and called out "Senior." Walking past Jialan Hall is the main hall. Although the main hall is not as majestic as the Yimei Golden Dome, it is not as majestic as Lejun Mountain, and it is not as majestic as the Lushina Buddha in Longmen Grottos. But the golden and dignified Sakyamuni Buddha is sitting in the hall, with his eyes slightly lowered, showing compassion for the world. When people step in, they will feel awe. I saw an old monk sitting under the Buddha statue. The old monk's white eyebrows were long and slender, casually draped on his face. He was wearing a gray monk's robe. He looked like an ordinary monk. He was barefoot and didn't even wear shoes. If the old monk on the side hadn't respectfully called him master, no one would have thought that he was the old abbot of Guanghua Temple. The old man sat up slowly and looked at Mr. Song with displeasure. "Why are you here again? Let's make a deal this time. If you dare to hit me again, I will call the police. I won't fight, I won't fight. I passed by today and took a look at you. I won't fight in the future." Mr. Song waved his hand towards the monk, indicating that he would never hit him again from now on, and pointed at Su Tong behind him. "This is my closed apprentice. Su Tong pays homage to senior." Su Tong learned the rules of the 8 gates and bowed slightly towards the old monk. Seeing that Mr. Song was in such a good mood today, the old monk didn't know what he was thinking of, and his face suddenly became serious. Miao Zhen, take, you, junior brother Su, to look around. Monk Miao Zhen was startled and could only bend down to Su Tong with a grimace and said, "Junior brother Su is here by chance. There is a Dharni Sutra explanation being held behind our temple. You might as well follow me and take a look." Su Tong glanced at Mr. Song and saw him nodding towards him, so he followed Miao Zhen with a smile. After sending these two juniors away, the old monk frowned and said to Mr. Song, "Old thief, are you planning to?" "Yes, I have lived for so long, and now that I have found my successor, why am I still begging for nothing?" Mr. Song sat on the futon and looked back at the big Buddha behind him. "The Buddha is about to pass away, how dare I continue to live? Screw you, you old thief, for comparing yourself to Buddha." The old monk was so angry that he cursed, but he was still a little reluctant. He and Mr. Song were actually good friends who had known each other for a long time. It was only some changes that caused the relationship between the two to become very bad. Later, whenever Mr. Song was in a bad mood, he would come to trouble him, so the old monk always avoided him over time. Today, Mr. Song suddenly came to him to say goodbye, and the old monk suddenly felt a little scared. This feeling of fear was not only the fear of being alone in the future, but also a feeling of emptiness, which made him feel very confused. And besides that, there is one more thing. The old monk glanced left and right, and after confirming that no one was there, he held old Song's hand and said, "Old thief, don't forget how you promised me, I will help you steal the esoteric magic, and when you are dying, we are going to destroy those paper figures, so you must not break your promise, otherwise this poor monk will not be able to wash away his sins even if he goes to the 18 hells." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 177. The Dharni Sutra is the authentic ancient Indian Buddhist scriptures passed down to China and belongs to Mahayana Buddhism. Normally, it is difficult for outsiders to hear lectures on this sutra, but today was an exception. Su Tong followed monk Miao Zhen swaggeringly. Occasionally, monks saw him along the way, but they did not dare to interfere, and even stood aside with his hands clasped together. Watch the two people leave. After passing through the small gate, you will see a Buddhist hall behind the bamboo forest in front. If you go further, you will enter the inner gate of Guanghua Temple. But monk Miao Zhen didn't stop walking. He led Su Tong inside and walked through the bamboo forest. He saw a two-story building that seemed to be in the Qing dynasty style standing there. There was a pond in front of him and a pavilion standing in front of him. The words Lufeng Pavilion are written on it, indicating that guests should stop here. Miao Zhen invited Su Tong to sit down in the pavilion, and a young monk immediately served him tea and cakes. Sitting in the pavilion, directly opposite you can see a group of monks wearing cassocks sitting cross-legged in the courtyard. Directly in front of you is an old monk holding a fly whisk. The old monk has a long beard and his age cannot be seen. He is dressed in white casual clothes. Looks like a fairy, quite like those eminent monks in TV series. This is senior brother Miao Jing. He has been studying Buddhism with master since he was 7 years old. He has studied the Dharni Sutra the most profoundly. Although Miao Zhen was filled with twists and turns when facing a young man in his 20s as his equal, but since his master recognized Su Tong's identity, Miao Zhen would never lack the most basic etiquette. When Su Tong heard this, he looked around and saw monk Miao Jing sitting cross-legged, with his fingers forming a very strange seal. I saw him first raising his left palm, bending his 5 fingers slightly, pressing the right little finger on the left big finger with his right hand, and reciting a mantra in a low voice, Om Ipo Road. Gradually, as the chanting became louder and louder, Su Tong's pupils tightened, and he actually saw a layer of gleaming white light covering the monk's body. In an instant, the monk's whole body was filled with bright light, which actually gave him a strong sense of repulsion. Miaojing seemed to have noticed something, and looked over here. When she saw that junior brother Miaozhen was there, she gradually calmed down the Buddha's light on her body. He began to explain to the monks that this is the protective mantra of the Vajra chapter of the Dharani Sutra. If a person makes offerings to the seal mantra every day, if he encounters an evil villain who becomes disgusted and secretly harms him, he should recite this mantra as the seal. All evil cannot invade. Miaojing then elaborated on the entry-level tips and explanations of Buddhist mantras. The monks nodded their heads and seemed to have benefited a lot. After the explanation, Miaojing stood up and came to the pavilion. She clasped her hands and walked in. First she nodded towards Miaozhen, then she looked at Su Tong and took a step forward to bow politely. I wonder who this little donor is. Su Tong felt uncomfortable being looked at by this monk. Perhaps because of his dark physique, he seemed to have a natural rejection of this kind of monk. It's like putting ice skates and red-hot briquettes together in winter. The two are naturally incompatible, and they feel uncomfortable when they get close to each other. Therefore, without waiting for Miaojing's introduction, Su Tong introduced himself first and said, "Senior brother, you are too polite. The next craftsman does not dare to disturb senior brother's teaching, so we should leave here." Upon seeing this, Miaozhen hurriedly introduced a few words about Su Tong's origin to Miaojing in a low voice. When Miaojing heard that he was actually the disciple of Old Man Song, his face turned a bit ugly. He already felt that something was wrong with Su Tong, let alone being the disciple of Old Man Song. The look in Su Tong's eyes immediately became cold, and there was even a flash of murderous intent. Although it was quickly concealed, it could not be hidden from Su Tong. Even when Miaojing glanced sideways, she found that Su Tong was standing aside and smiling silly at him. Seeing this wonderful scene, his heart moved. He stepped forward to stop Su Tong, clasped his hands and said, "Amitabha, it turns out that he is the last disciple of Mr. Song and the future leader of the 7 sections. This young monk does not know Mount Tai. I hope that junior brother Su can forgive me." Seeing that Miaojing was so enthusiastic suddenly, Su Tong had no expression on his face, but he immediately became alert in his heart. When his heart moved, his face immediately turned into a flattered smile. "Senior brother, what are you talking about? I really can't bear it." The two exchanged pleasantries, which made Miaozhen very tired. At first glance, the old man and the young man seemed to be descendants, but they could still call themselves brothers and sisters together. The parents were incompetent, which really made Miaozhen feel funny. But there is something strange in my heart. Senior brother Miaojing is most dissatisfied with Mr. Song. Every time Master and Mr. Song argue, he will always be the first one to jump out and scold Mr. Song. But the strange thing is that after every scolding, Master he was punished to copy scriptures. Why is senior brother Miaojing so enthusiastic towards junior brother Junior Su today? Thinking of Miaozhen, he raised his eyebrows slightly. As the saying goes, there must be a monster when something goes wrong. Although he is an honest man, it doesn't mean that he has been living like a dog for his entire age. Sensing that brother Miaojing's expression was not right, Miaozhen immediately urged Su Tong, "Junior brother Su, we might as well walk around again. I think Mr. Song will go back later. Let's go to the bottom of the mountain and wait." "How is he?" Miaojing's expression suddenly turned ugly when she heard this, but she couldn't say anything. She could only lead Su Tong forward with a smile, testing Su Tong's depth as he walked. "For example, when did you become a master, and are you starting now?" Su Tong realized that Miaojing was not holding anything back, so his expression became more exaggerated, and he even boasted about some mysterious means he had and so on. Miao Jing and Miao Zhen looked at each other after hearing this. After a few words, they understood Su Tong's background. Suddenly their eyes met and their attitudes towards Su Tong were somewhat contemptuous. Especially in Miao Jing, those eyes stared at Su Tong, and their eyes shone coldly several times. Just when the three of them were chatting lively, Mr. Song and the old abbot finally walked out of the main hall side by side. The two old men have lived for a long time, which adds up to almost 2 centuries, but their mental state is many times better than that of the sick young man now. The two of them walked to the door, and Mr. Song bowed his hands towards the old abbot. There was no politeness between the two of them. They were both good friends who met when they were young and crazy. No matter how big the misunderstanding was, it should be gone at this point. It's just that the old abbot was not as generous as Mr. Song. He stepped forward with frowning eyes, took Mr. Song's hand and whispered in a serious voice, "Friend, I know the difficulties in your heart, but the days are like this, you can't change it. How can fate have good results? Don't bring disaster to the world. That would be a shame to Mr. Shui." Mr. Song looked sad for a moment, and left with Su Tong silently. On the way, he seemed to notice that Mr. Song was in a bad mood, so Su Tong didn't say anything. When he got home, it was already noon, and he made a casual meal of noodles. The master and the apprentice went back to the room to take a nap after filling their stomachs. In fact, Su Tong was not asleep, and Mr. Song was not asleep either. They were lying on the bed with their own thoughts. Su Tong thought about the unkind look that monk Miao Jing gave him today. Along the way, he intentionally or unintentionally asked about when he started to practice and what kind of cultivation topics he had now. Isn't it clear that he wants to cause trouble for himself? But I am also very curious. When I met Gao Zhou, I finally realized that there are actually some extraordinary masters in reality. I just don't know who is higher and who is lower among these masters and players. One has practiced Sanfu in the summer and Sanjiu in the winter, and has a skill that has been cultivated day by day for more than 10 years. The other has the ability to easily obtain the decades of hard work of these senior masters with the help of prop cards. When the two collided, he was also looking forward to knowing how big the difference really was. Therefore, when faced with Miao Jing's temptation, I answered all questions without hiding anything. I simply added a WeChat account and sent a message to Miao Jing in the evening, "No one is home, come quickly, news." Here Su Tong was thinking about the Wonderland, his ears suddenly twitched, and when he opened his eyes, he saw that Mr. Song had actually changed into clothes and went out with his hands behind his back. Huh! It's as hot as a stove outside in these dog days of summer. Mr. Song shouldn't be taking a nap with his wife in his arms at this time, so why are you still going outside? In confusion, Su Tong wanted to follow him, but as soon as he sat up from the bed, his cell phone rang suddenly. This mobile phone was given to him by Gao Zhou to facilitate contact between the two. It only contained Gao Zhou's phone number. After pressing the answer button, I heard Gao Zhou's voice from the other end of the phone. "The world time of the next script is set in 3 days, no problem." It turns out that as the temporary captain, after Su Tong shared his progress in the Age of Panic mission with Gao Zhou needed to confirm with the script library in advance the next time he would enter the mission script world. Remember to bring some scraps of silver. This thing is not ostentatious, it is hard currency, and don't bring particularly eye-catching food. I once saw a big idiot who cooked a bucket of Master Kong instant noodles by himself during the Warring States period. The result was, it caused a lot of trouble. I can understand the reason for this. In the final analysis, it is still the reason for the repulsion effect. Su Tong asked Gao Zhou to prepare some cigarette leaves. He was almost out of cigarette leaves, which made him listless recently. The two then discussed the purchase list in detail, and Gao Zhou planned to take advantage of this time to travel overseas to see if he could buy 2 guns. After all, judging from the mission, the script this time must be in modern times, so it would be best to have a gun for self-defense. Gao Zhou went to buy weapons, while Su Tong purchased logistics. This can maximize the use of the grids in the two people's prop books. After the discussion, Su Tong immediately walked out of the room and went straight to the mall for a new round of large purchases. In addition to some warm clothes, food, and drink, the most important thing is to buy a lot of medicines, such as amoxicillin glue, penicillin, gonmouling, etc. In the past, these potions were no worse than those elixirs, and they might have a big effect at a critical moment. After the purchase was completed, Su Tong was waiting for the car to return to the door. When he was about to get off the car, his eyes suddenly lit up and his hand that was about to open the door stopped. Through the car window, I saw a bare head on the street, which stood out among the crowd. "You're so impatient that you took the bait." I thought that this bald man would have to wait for a few days, but he didn't expect that he would only come back this morning. In the afternoon, the old guy wouldn't be able to wait. Among the crowd, I saw Monk Miaojing holding a whisk in his hand and wearing casual clothes. He looked nondescript. Those who didn't know better thought he was filming Duyan for a live broadcast. In fact, what Su Tong didn't know was that not long after they left, Miaozhen and Miaozhen started to quarrel. Even though Monk Miaozhen doesn't want to see Master Su Tong, Miaozhen doesn't have any bad intentions. Miaojing is different. "I can't beat the old one, but I can't beat the young one?" Obviously, Monk Miaojing suffered a lot at the hands of Old Song, and he kept all these accounts clearly in his heart. After learning that Su Tong was a close disciple of Mr. Song, he immediately wanted to make this boy suffer a big loss. However, Miaozhen saw through it and stopped him directly. Just watching Su Tong and Mr. Song leave, the more I thought about Miaojing, the more uncomfortable I felt, and my heart was as dry as a ball of fire. I originally thought about coming back to Su Tong in a few days, but then I thought about it and was worried that Miaozhen was causing trouble, so I simply didn't do anything and kept chasing him after finding a reason. Patting the things in his backpack, Miaojing raised the corner of his mouth and said to himself, "It just so happens that I personally do what Master is unwilling to do, which can be considered as eliminating harm for the people." Miaojing had already made up her mind to vent her bad breath today no matter what, and then she got up and went to Japan to hide. When she came back in a few months, everything would have settled long ago. When he thought of this, Miaojing suddenly felt much more comfortable. When he was lost in thought, he was suddenly tapped on the shoulder. Miaojing suddenly became alert. When he turned around, he realized that it was someone else who was the target he was looking for. Mr. Song's close disciple. "Isn't this senior brother Miaojing? Are you, could it be?" Because there happened to be a Hui market nearby, selling mostly mutton and beef, Su Tong pointed around and asked with a smile, "Are you hungry?" Miaojing was stunned when she heard this, and followed Su Tong's hand. She didn't know whether it was intentional or not, but Su Tong's finger pointed at the public toilet again. Miaojing squinted her eyes and pretended not to see it. She picked up the backpack and gave it to Su Tong with a smile. "My master thought that Mr. Song left in a hurry and asked me to send these things over. I wonder if Mr. Song can be at home. Unfortunately, my master went out in the afternoon. I don't know where he went. Judging from the lock on the door, he probably hasn't come back yet. How about coming back another day?" Su Tong deliberately whetted Miaojing's appetite and said tentatively. Miaojing was heartbroken. How could she come back another day? With just such a disciple at home and old man Song not around, isn't this a God-given opportunity? If he left, wouldn't he regret it for the rest of his life? Ever since, Miaojing made a decision on the spot that he would regret for the rest of his life. "No, in that case, I will just give this thing to junior brother Su. However, this thing is magical. Please open the door and lead the way. We will explain to junior brother Su after we understand the mystery." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 178. Okay, okay. Su Tong had no reason to let such an idiot come to his door. He quickly opened the door and invited Miao Jing to come in. He couldn't help but sneered secretly in his heart to see what this unlucky guy was going to do today. As soon as he entered the door, Miao Jing looked at the small courtyard in front of him and couldn't help but sneer secretly. Back then, Shui Gui was so famous in L City that everyone admired him, but he didn't want to be plotted against him in the end and die because of the evil magic tricked by the gods. What is left now are only 2 short houses and a small courtyard in the old city, which is sad to think about. Senior brother, please come this way. Su Tong very enthusiastically invited Miao Jing to approach the main house. As soon as he opened the door curtain, Miao Jing was stunned for a moment. Looking at the paper figures in the room, Miao Jing's bald head looked like a rash, and his scalp felt like it was being pulled up. As soon as I took 2 steps back, I felt a cold sweat break out in my heart. After standing outside the door to calm down for a moment, he took Su Tong's arm and said, "Junior brother Su, to be honest, the poor monk came here today precisely for these paper figures." "Paper man." "Right." Miao Jing nodded, pulled him to sit on a chair by the door, and told him an old story. It is said that when Mr. Shui left, Mr. Song's whole family died in a fire, which really fulfilled Mr. Song's fate of lonely. But overnight, the sky was vast, and only Mr. Song was left alone in this world. All his relatives and friends died in a fire overnight. Such a blow, no matter how strong-minded the person is, will not be able to recover for a while. His master Xianmu was also the monk who managed the Buddhist scripture pavilion in Guanghua Temple at that time. He also had a lifelong friendship with Mr. Song. He hurried over immediately after learning about this incident. Later, in order to comfort Mr. Song, Suanmu told him that there is a strange tantric scripture hidden in Guanghua Temple. This scripture has a lot to do with Japanese tantric Buddhism. There may be some special methods in it that can save the dead from reincarnation. Can also restore yang to the deceased. Upon hearing this, Mr. Song immediately seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. He begged Xia Suanmu and had no choice but to agree to steal the book from the Sutra Pavilion and lend it to him to read. In fact, Xianmu's heart was good, and he deliberately said this to him just to give him a spiritual sustenance and prevent him from sinking completely. As for this mysterious sutra, it was not a lie to him. There was this legend, but the content in the book was not comprehensive, and many chapters were missing. Not only was the content incomplete, it was also extremely bitter and difficult to understand. All the monks and elders in the temple tried it, but no one understood the content. This is why Xianmu dared to steal this book and give it to him. I originally thought that after Mr. Song found out that he could not decipher the scriptures, he would gradually let go of this burden as time passed, and then return the scriptures himself. But everything in the world is a coincidence. Suanmu never dreamed that Mr. Song, an origami master, could understand the scriptures that even a professional monk could not understand. Not only did he understand it, he actually figured out a set of strange and evil forbidden techniques from it. It doesn't matter if the forbidden techniques are not complete. He combined this set of forbidden techniques with his own soul-hiding technique of tying paper, and hey, he really succeeded. It's done, shouldn't it be a good thing? Su Tong was sitting opposite Miao Jing. When he glanced back from the corner of his eye, he saw that the door curtain of the room seemed to be blown by a slight breeze. The door curtain was slightly opened with a small opening, and it was dark as if a pair of eyes were hiding inside. Watching quietly. No. Big mistake. Monk Miao Jing shook his head repeatedly and said, "Your master has no idea what he summoned in the end. Are these paper figures really his dead wife?" The more Miao Jing talked about it, the more excited she said, "In ancient times, there were female ghosts who borrowed corpses to resurrect their souls, but there is no guarantee that there are no demons who borrowed paper to resurrect their souls. The forbidden technique recorded in the tantric sects seems to be an ancient spell to call the evil god. Your master used the ashes of his relatives to you summoned others, that's why your master always comes to trouble my master. Miao Jing's words made Su Tong suddenly think of the image of his wife holding Guicha's head and chewing on it. He raised his eyebrows slightly and understood immediately in his heart. But then I thought about it, even though Mr. Song knew this, he still kept these paper figures because they contained the ashes of his relatives. Your master's end is approaching recently. Whether he is alive or dead, no one can suppress these things. When the time comes, they will be a scourge left in the world. That's why I came to help your master. As Miao Jing spoke, she suddenly reached out and grabbed Su Tong's wrist. Junior brother Su, you must help me with this, otherwise. Of course. It is our duty as 8 disciples to eliminate harm for the people. Su Tong reacted faster than him. He stood up and grabbed Miao Jing's arm heavily with his other hand. He pinched it with his fingers and instantly Miao Jing's face turned red. He originally thought he would be single for so many years, no. He has been chanting sutras and meditating for so many years. Despite his age, his body is as strong as an ox. Thinking about Su Tong, a young man, he still can't catch him. But little did he know that after 2 comprehensive improvements in Su Tong's physique, his strength was not inferior to those of professional athletes at all, and was even much stronger. Su Tong pinched it with his fingers, and Miao Jing's face began to deform. Fortunately, Su Tong did not continue to pinch it, but instead let go of his hand, looked at Miao Jing's satchel and asked, "What is the divine object that senior brother just mentioned, what's the magic use?" Miao Jing's arms were so painful that she could hardly lift them. When she heard Su Tong's question, she felt relieved. Did she think that this kid grew up taking hormones? So strong? Fortunately, he was willing to cooperate, so he had a lot of energy left. In this case, he would use it first, and when he was done using it, he would give him a lesson and let him know what it means to be evil and ruthless in society. Thinking of this wonderful scene, I immediately opened my satchel and saw that there were calligraphy sheets inside. This is a 28-character tantric mantra. Paste them on the surrounding walls in order. Once these evil spirits walk out of the house, they will be wiped out and will not be reincarnated. Miao Jing said this with a proud face. These copybooks were not produced casually. The paper on which the calligraphy was written was enshrined in the Mahavira Hall, in the palm of the Buddha, and was a precious paper that had been enshrined for many years. With great power of faith, I wrote 28 words, each of which had to be blessed by scriptures thousands of times. Just for these 28 words, Wonderland has been preparing for several years, and today it finally comes in use. It is just to let this boy see what is the right way of Buddhism, and it is not something that can be compared with some low-level cats and dogs. Oh, I got it. Su Tong seemed to understand. He took these characters from Miao Jing's hand, took Miao Jing's arm to stand up from the chair and walked back. As he walked, he said, "Master, there is one thing I still don't understand." "Please excuse me." The master clears up the confusion. Miao Jing looked calm and said, "Amitabha, junior brother Su just said it doesn't matter." "Master, are you a fan of Liang Jinggru?" "Who?" Miao Jing was startled, and before her mind could turn around, Su Tong suddenly raised his leg and kicked him up, instantly knocking Miao Jing over and into the back room of the house. Miao Jing was caught off guard by this kick, and she heard Su Tong's scolding, "You came to my house so arrogantly, and you want me to help you deal with my wife? You are not a fan of Liang Jinggru, who gave you the courage, Tenga what?" As he spoke, Su Tong poked his head in from outside the door curtain, grinned at the paper man sitting on the chair, raised his hand and closed the door. Buzz, boom. It would be dark in an old house like this, but once the door is closed, there is no light at all. "Oh, you little turtle grandson." Suddenly Su Tong kicked him in. Miao Jing had been a monk for many years, and it was inevitable that he would start to use foul language. However, when he sat up, he realized that the room in front of him was so dark that he could not see his fingers, but when he waited for him, when he looked up, he could clearly see the woman in the large floral dress staring at him blankly on the chair. The gray-white face was tinged with cyan in the darkness, and the two pairs of dull pupils made people feel more and more frightened the more they looked at it. Miao Jing was startled at first, but then she quickly got up from the ground and put her hands flat on her chest, forming a strange handprint. It was the same handprint that Su Tong saw at Guanghua Temple during the day. "Humph, you evildoers, even if you don't dare to do evil in front of this poor monk." Miao Jing looked back at the paper figures in the room and smiled coldly. He had a divine spell to protect his body. Even if these evil spirits really woke up, they would never be able to hurt him. Buzz. Just when the wonderful scene was in full swing, the door behind him suddenly opened, and Su Tong, who had just left, was holding a basin in his hand, and poured it down head-on. Suddenly, a basin of yellow water was poured on Miao Jing's body. As soon as the yellow water touched her body, Miao Jing's face suddenly changed and she glared at Su Tong. "What's this?" A child peas. As he said this, he became a little embarrassed and said, "It's just that I've been a little angry lately." Hearing that it was actually a child's urine, Miao Jing was confused and cursed, "You little brat, you have learned the tricks of Master Beidong. You have been a poor monk who has been practicing hard for many years, and you are still afraid of things." As she spoke, Miao Jing reached out and grabbed Su Tong's arm. However, as soon as he stretched out his hand, he felt a weight on his back. He suddenly came back to his senses and saw a red embroidered shoe with flowers embroidered on it, stepping on him. On the back. Looking at the shoe online, I saw a woman sitting in the air, smiling with a cold face. When did a young monk who has been practicing for more than 40 years dare to act like a wolf in front of me? As she said this, she stepped on the embroidered shoes. For a moment, Miao Jing felt as if a big stone was pressing down on her back. She tilted her body and fell to the ground with a pop, and blood flowed from her mouth. "Squirt out." Su Tong took a look and saw that the master's wife was still sitting in the air. The only thing that really stepped on the back of monk Miao Jing was the embroidered shoe. "Hey! I still thought you could win? You haven't hit it for a long time." When Su Tong saw this, he was about to close the door and run away. However, his wife looked at him coldly. "Tong, my wife treats you very well. You left those characters, don't you want to deal with me?" Hearing this, Su Tong's heart skipped a beat, and he was about to close the door, but suddenly found that he couldn't move his feet. When he lowered his head, he saw the two dolls were hugging his calves, one on the left and one on the right. Especially the female doll stared at him with a resentful look. "I thought you wouldn't lie to me, but I didn't expect you to be like those heartless people outside." The voice of the girl was the same as that of the mistress. Su Tong frowned, raised his leg and kicked the girl out. "Get out of here, I am a good law-abiding citizen." He kicked the girl away, and the boy on the side opened his mouth and tried to bite Su Tong's calf. But before the teeth touched his legs, a slender tentacle suddenly wrapped around his neck, and with a flick, the boy flew away. I saw that big fatty had been summoned by Su Tong behind him. With a simple and honest expression, he was looking around curiously. "Huh." Seeing the fat man, the teacher's wife was stunned for a moment. After looking up and down the fat man suspiciously, she couldn't help but muttered, "Strange, this doesn't look like it, does it?" In addition to doubts, his eyes turned sharper when he looked at Su Tong. "Good boy, it's a good thing that the old man regards you as his own. I didn't expect you to hide it behind his back. In this case, I can't allow you to survive. It just so happens that this old man is leaving, and your master and disciple Huan Quan will accompany you, not alone either." "No, no, no, "Master, what are you doing? Before I could betray my master, you are planning to clean up the family." Su Tong looked sad, as if he had been greatly wronged. "Humph. That old guy doesn't have much time left." He ran to Guanghua Temple again. "I'm afraid he has already made a plan in his mind. You see, he came back today and left in a hurry without even entering the house to eat. In all likelihood, he is going to go to Guanghua Temple. Go get our soul box. It's ridiculous that we have helped him for so many years, and now he will actually come with outsiders to harm me." Mentioning this matter, the mistress became more and more angry. She saw with her own eyes that the old guy took out a custody certificate for the crematorium urn from the cabinet before leaving. She felt something was wrong at that time, but now that monk Miaojing came, she understood everything. The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became when she thought that after so many years of hard work, she would end up with a fate that would not allow her to survive. Seeing that this misunderstanding was getting serious, Su Tong's eyes rolled around and he quickly explained, "Master Niang misunderstood, my master is not that kind of person, my master." Before Su Tonghua finished speaking, he heard a sound of banging on the door outside the yard, and then he heard someone yelling and cursing outside the door, "Old guy named Song, you have been whoring in our shop for so many years, and you have lost even a penny. It's not settled, it's been so many years, when did you settle the money? Get out of here." The voice sounded like that of a woman, but Su Tong didn't know what kind of money his master owed him. When he was stunned, he saw his master's wife staring at him with a sneer on her face. For a moment, the corner of Su Tong's mouth twitched slightly. Actually, my master and I are not very familiar with each other. Why don't you wait? This is still mine. If not, you can keep it for a few more decades. Shall I send you away too?" When she heard that she finally had to send the old one away, and the younger one came, the master's wife snorted angrily and laughed, "It's not easy to leave, I will send you away now." As she said this, the mistress casually threw the other embroidered shoe towards Su Tong.